I don't know how many of you caught last night's captive audience with Vance Day, but it was a special Memorial Day edition. You might want to go back and watch that. It actually was very, very good. And he talked about Don Malarkey and the Band of Brothers, who he knew very well personally. It's a great story. And I learned some things I didn't know. And I've known Vance for just around 20 years, actually.
Yeah.
Met him when he was first presenting. He was vice chair of the Oregon Republican Party, and he was presenting with Don Malarkey the story of the Band of Brothers with Don Malarkey right next to him. So,
Wow.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great
Yeah,
episode.
Don was a good Oregon Republican.
He was, and enthusiastically so, which is something that Vance shared with me as well. He'd get in like loud arguments with people, including Stephen Ambrose, who was the writer for the Band of Brothers, but Ambrose loved LBJ, and yeah, I know. And so Don Malarkey's like, LBJ, he was awful, and so they get into these yelling matches and stuff, but then they, did all this great work together too. So I think that's good. People can actually have disagreements.
You can disagree and not divide. You can disagree and not make an enemy. I mean, disagreement is not division. Unless you're a my way or the highway guy, and if that's the case, politics is probably not a good place for you.
Well, and actually, that is one of the issues that we're going to start out here with, which is the Senate GOP walkout continues, and we've got a my way or the highway guy who is running things over in the Senate for the Democrats. Rob Wagner.
Did you see him on that news thing?
Ken Bodie.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that was a jaw dropper because that was a very predictable question. Sometimes the media doesn't ask these tough questions, but it was extremely predictable and should have been easy. And Rob Wagner pretended like he wasn't even like, I don't know what you're talking about.
He lied.
I haven't heard about that.
He just flat out lied. I mean, maybe it's because he's a Republican, or a Democrat, but if you're a Republican and and you've done this many times, Kevin, you've done a lot of media, and you're going to do an interview or something, or a hit on they turn into hit pieces, but a hit on a TV station or something, that they're going to ask, tough questions, right? I mean, and so you would know. Yeah. And so you would know going in, but yeah, that was just a jaw dropper. Poor guy. I mean, I feel bad for him if he wasn't such an incompetent fool.
Well, and he's got this hair that just looks like the guy that used to get beat up on the playground look, which is that hair, and it's kind of like a little hook of hair hanging over his face. But he really is speechless when he's asked about the cultural corruption of Democrats in Salem. He had no idea.
I didn't know about the $500,000 donation that's been all over the news, the largest single donation to the DPO.
Wow. Yeah, he missed that one.
Shame on the Democrats for keeping him in the dark.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, I got to say, though, I think there's more things starting to unravel for the Democrats because this guy is clearly in over his head, Rob Wagner. He does not know what he's doing. He doesn't know how to communicate with people, to manage them. He is actually not that experienced, hasn't been in the Senate long. And he was just somebody who was placed in there by the public employee unions who he worked for before, is like a lobbyist. And they just stuck him in there and said, now you're our guy and you'll be majority leader. There you go. And then suddenly he found himself in charge with Peter Courtney retired. And he is clearly he's lost.
Yeah, he is.
And he's also a big fat phony. Like he just lies to people's faces, condescends to them. I've seen some of it personally. He is so condescending. Yeah. And he gave I saw him make a speech in Portland back in January where they were very enthusiastic about how much money they were going to spend on everything and just run roughshod with this agenda that how could anyone disagree with this agenda? We're just going to make it happen. And then they talked about unity and reaching across the aisle. And I'm like, this smells to high heaven. This is BS. And what happened? Turned out to be complete and total and utter BS. And there's several editorials and some media commentaries that are starting to recognize that Rob Wagner's not in charge of the legislature, and neither is the speaker.
No, you know who's in charge of the Oregon legislature right now? 13 Republican senators. That's who's in charge of the legislature right now.
That's right. And they made it that way because Measure 113, even if it does apply and survives court scrutiny, it's like Democrat bet that Republicans are exactly like Democrats, that all they care about is how long can they stay in office and keep power. And they pushed them too far, and they didn't want to follow the process. Democrats didn't want to follow the process. They're just like, we're not compromising. We're not doing anything. You just come back and do your job like we told you to, like a controlled opposition. And they said, we're not controlled. Take a hike. And I actually admire what they're doing.
I do too.
It's not easy.
I do too. Well, they're putting it all on the line, and they're putting it all on the line, whether Oregonians realize it or not. They're putting it all on the line for every Oregonian. I mean, these are some of these bills that they're trying to stop are not good for anyone. I mean, 2002 is, we've said it before. It's the child sex trafficker assistance bill.
Yeah.
We already have, Oregon is already a hotbed for child sex trafficking. We don't need to protect them anymore. And it's the right thing to do to deny them quorum, to stop this bad legislation. And if it costs the entire session and, the needful bills, then that's what it cost.
Well, this is what's interesting about this is, and Jeff, by the way, Jeff Golden from Ashland, who's actually, they said, an increasingly rare Democrat, what has become solidly Republican southwest of the state, admitted that it's probably a real long shot that the senators will come back. Yeah, because there's no.
Why should they?
Why should?
Yeah,
they?
why should they? Why should they?
There's no compromise. There's no discussion going on, and so, but what's becoming apparent is that, all of this legislation, the Democrats prioritized and decided they decided to die on this hill on HB 2002, HB 2005, which is the one that's basically trying to repeal the Second Amendment, especially for 18, 19, and 20-year-olds.
Yeah.
And also there's a whole series of other bills that promise to do all kinds of ridiculous things, none of which the general population can understand, especially not in a state where even if you're supposed to be able to read at 8th grade level, you can't.
Right.
And,
well, yeah, and people need to understand that Wagner could fix this, right?
It's in his power.
Wagner could say, hey, look, I will excuse all your absences if you come back and vote for the budget and whatever the hell else that's constitutionally required. And I will keep the rest of it off of the floor. The Senate president can do that. The Senate president controls what gets heard, what does not, just like the Speaker of the House and the Oregon House controls what comes to the floor and what does not. So he could fix it.
And they're whining. The Democrats are whining. Well, but you're stopping really important legislation that we all agree is very important. Like we have to pass a budget. That's our main job. It's like, well, then why don't you didn't prioritize that. You said, I want to go and make it possible for 15-year-olds to get their genitals mutilated without parental knowledge. That's way more important than passing a damn budget.
Yeah.
So that's what they
decriminalize the hiding of an infant death.
Yeah. That's so much more important.
Oh man!
And they didn't run on that, by the way. So let's see.
I didn't see
it. In 2024. But there's a really good, Hasso Herring wrote an editorial that says preventing bad laws is part of the job. Like people are like, they're not doing their jobs. No, this is actually part of the job. Now, it perhaps voters also were unaware of what Measure 113 even meant when they voted for it, which is who's surprised at that in a state where they play games with ballot titles and then no one actually knows, like Measure 110. They had no idea that crap was going to suck that bad. They didn't know that we were like 50th in treatment and had no prospects of doing anything. So what's turning out with Measure 113 is that people voted for it, but they actually cared about stopping some of these bills, because all these counties where these senators are from, with a couple of exceptions, actually voted for it, which means they didn't know what they were voting for, because they sure as hell didn't want the bills that are being passed to be passed anyway. They didn't. So there you go. And I think John Charles actually has a really good explanation here. If you completely disrespect the minority and you decide to go to wild extremes, and you don't want to broker a compromise, then expect this to happen. This is what happens. This is what should happen, actually.
I agree.
So it's fascinating. This is going to continue, and I don't think that they're coming back, because I think that the Democrats are going to wait. They're going to gavel out this session and they're going to call a special session, try to pass a budget. But you know what's going to happen? Something super awesome is going to happen. Hundreds and hundreds of bills are going to die. Hundreds. Ones that the Democrats almost thought were slam dunks.
Bills we don't need. I'm thoroughly convinced that in the first 100 years of Oregon's history, or probably even less, that we've passed all of the bills that we need.
Yeah. And if the legislature is serious about doing important stuff, and they think it's a priority, do it first.
Mm-hmm.
But they thought, hey, we've got this game where we wait for revenue forecasts, and then we wait, to the very end. We torture the minority and make them beg us to, fund a bridge in their district, and then we'll just, eventually we'll pass a budget and it'll be whatever we want. And then we'll also say we don't have enough money, we need to raise taxes. It's that same old stupid game. Yeah. Oops, didn't work this time. Didn't work.
No, it didn't.
Well, we got quite a lot going on, really, both at the state and federal level. One of the thing at the state level, which this is a gaslighting warning. What Democrats, they like to blame the opposition for things that they couldn't do. So here's the one. Everybody knows that we've got Measure 110, that it's actually supposed to generate close to $265 million that they are going to spend on all kinds of drug treatment programs, which they haven't. They failed to do it. Well, actually now, I saw this article. It says Oregon officials want closer monitoring of the $265 million for drug decriminalization, because 2.5 years into this, they're starting to realize that
it's not getting better.
Yeah, and they're actually spending the money. They had to fire a drug recovery nonprofit in Klamath Falls, accused of failing to submit completed expenditure and data reports and buying a building for more than double the authorized amount. The amount of graft and corruption must be unbelievable with this, because that was only a $1.5 million contract, and they're shelling out hundreds of millions of dollars. But buried in this article was we're trying to get more oversight, and we need more resources to do it. And the Oregon Health Authority says, there's a bill to provide all of that remains stuck in the Senate, along with more than 100 other bills because of a walkout by Republican senators. Now, the article goes on to claim that Democrats were more in favor of abortion rights and transgender care, as they phrase it, which is also nonsense and spin, and gun safety. But I don't think any of those three things were the top priorities that voters told them at the polls in 2022. They said, You guys are a bunch of F-ups. Get this stuff fixed and start doing something about all these zombies running around doing fentanyl and meth for which we have no treatment, and they're flooding into the state and setting up tents, which we're giving them in all the cities. Do something about that.
Yeah.
Now they're whining that they apparently don't have enough money to provide oversight to the hundreds of millions of dollars they already
We don't have enough money to watch the money that we're throwing into the fire.
So we'll just go on being incompetent. Can't help it. Don't know. Got money. Got to spend it. Let's waste it. And
people give me crap for not wanting to pay taxes.
And then this happens. Well, speaking of that, there's some big news at the federal level. So there's this Kevin McCarthy, Biden, Brandon regime agreement to raise the debt limit. I don't know. I mean, they're getting something for this. It's not the easiest battle because the media is totally distorted the issue and made everybody think the world's going to end because the government has no money. We ran out of money. I don't know where it went. They get hundreds of billions of dollars coming in in tax revenues, but they've run out of money apparently. So they just can't find any. And they keep moving the date back. Remember, it was going to be June 1st. We're going to run out of money. Now it's magically June 5th. Why? Because it's going to take that long, apparently, for them to pass the bill. So now we won't run out until the 5th when Janet Yellen flips a switch and says, we're out of money. So there's going to be a vote on this debt limit compromise. And there is a rebellion, actually, against this. The deal's supposed to eliminate unspent COVID funds, block IRS expansion, and put into place some reforms like permitting and blah, blah, blah. It's not a lot of great stuff, but it's also, I think we all knew that the debt limit was going to be raised, but there is some of this unity behind Kevin McCarthy has frayed. The Freedom Caucus has warning people that this is a pretty serious vote if you vote in favor of it. Representative Bishop has actually already publicly supported ousting Kevin McCarthy over this. Dan Bishop from North Carolina, who is a smart guy. But, I don't know. This seems like the nuclear option on this one. That's kind of the news around that. What are you hearing about this? What are your thoughts on the debt limit and the compromise?
Well, I think the only good move on the debt limit, the only deal that should be made on the debt ceiling is to lower it.
Yeah, that's
it's not a question of will the U.S. government default or the other governments of the world that are living on printed money. It's when.
It's when, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the logical extension to this debt bubble that we're living under. I mean, government wants to spend money and they print money to do it. It's called counterfeiting. And they pass a bill to make it legal, and it shouldn't be legal because it's on our backs, theoretically.
It creates inflation. It creates inflation, which everybody says, well, that's bad. We got to stop inflation. Okay,
right.
Then stop causing it.
Well, stop the spending. To take a line from 2009, the beginning of the Tea Party, stop the spending. Stop the, blankety blank effing spending. Just stop it. Stop spending money. And if we stop spending money, we don't have to print money. There's a point where the service on the debt exceeds our ability to pay.
It's exceeded the defense budget, which is
I'm not
actually
sure,
one of the things the government should do.
Yeah. I'm not sure where that is, but if you subscribe to MMT, modern monetary theory, in theory, a productive first world Western nation can print their way to prosperity. But throughout the history of mankind, thousands of years, the inflation of the money supply, making more money where there is no value behind it, just results in disaster. And we're all going to go, the whole world is going to come crashing down. It's just not the United States of America. When the United States of America defaults or fails or can't pay its bills, the rest of the world goes with it. And, we all get a new currency. Everything gets reset. That's what happens when currencies crash. As far as I'm concerned, let's just do it now.
Yeah, and I think that this is what the battle is about. I think the presidential race is going to contain some of this. It caught my attention that Ron DeSantis has latched onto this. He's talking about how it was the debt deal is inadequate when the country is careening towards bankruptcy. And I think President Trump's probably going to be addressing this too. I really do want to see a real debate about this, even though people have become conditioned to believe that this is actually can just go on forever. As you said, history doesn't bear this out. Recent history is really just a recent history of kicking the can further down the road. But we're still spending at the level that we did coming out of the COVID emergency. We should be at best back before the COVID emergency began, because it's over. And yet all that spending that was supposed to be temporary and emergency, there's no such thing. Every crisis just becomes another reason to expand the government, and it doesn't shrink.
Well, spending is used to buy votes. That's all it is. And fundamentally, we should not be spending any money that we don't bring in taxes. I mean, we should spend no money that requires the printing presses to fire up. Yet, I'm not sure what it is today. It's historically in the last decade been about 40 cents of every dollar. We take in 3 billion or 3 trillion, we spend, 4.5 trillion or 5 trillion. And I'm not even sure what the budget is. It's just a ridiculous amount. And it doesn't make there's no way out of raising the debt limit. There's no way out of financing government spending, i.e. the buying of votes, with the printing of money. There's no way out of that. It doesn't end well. There's no way for it to end well.
I do know how it ends. It ends with a government that is no longer able to defend the country, maintain law and order. And that happens the moment the cost of servicing the debt exceeds your ability to pay it. And then people are like, well, then I'm not buying your debt. And you're like, so then you can't produce more debt to pay for the debt, and you're screwed.
Yeah.
That happens, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's always been, the brain trusts in DC's financial sector. It's always been their contention that you can inflate your way out of it. And by inflate, I mean print. But you can't. I don't think no one's ever been able to do it yet. I don't know where MMMT comes from, other than, some Columbia economics students who ate mushrooms. It just doesn't. It doesn't work. There's no way to make that work. I mean, money, the exchange of money and what the medium that we call money. I mean, money is a convenience. Money, became a convenience for governments to take, basically from people. I mean, I'm sure a long time ago in biblical times, it was, one sheep out of 10 or whatever the heck it was. And now we have this money. But, money at its fundamental value, if you increase the supply of it, then it becomes less valuable. And that's exactly, why we're, we have had some supply problems, but, that's why everything continues to cost more. That's why people see pictures of 1967 gas stations and it says, 27 cents. They go, oh God, those were the good old days. Well, you know what? In inflation in just dollars, that was $3. Gasoline's never been cheap. It's always been more than $2 a gallon. It was 19 cents in 1932, but in inflation in just dollars, that's more than $2.
Yeah. Yeah. Which if it takes more dollars to buy the same thing, that is inflation. That is inflation, and that is taking people who bother to save money and humiliating them for
It's
considering.
a tax. It's a tax, Kevin. It's the inflation tax. It's the way government finances its spending is by printing money. It's a tax, and as everybody knows, everybody who's watching, Pat and Lori and Bobby and everyone that I can see right here, as everybody knows, we're all getting taxed to the gills on this thing. I mean, you can't even go to a fast food restaurant anymore for less than $10.
Yeah. Yeah, inexpensive food is not cheap anymore. And if you're on fixed income, which is essentially living off a kind of savings, then it's the same story. They're robbing you from you, and they're robbing from you and claiming that somebody in the future is going to make it up, which is just idiocy.
There's no, I mean, you could take all of the money that everyone makes and leave them with nothing, and you can't. I don't think that will pay the debt.
Yeah.
All of the money that everyone makes in a year, 100% tax on income.
Yeah. No, you might be able to grow your way out of it if you stop spending and borrowing so much, but you can definitely never.
Well, I mean, an expanding economy. People have this strange idea that economies are fixed, and if somebody gets, if a rich guy, gets $100 billion, then he's taken from someone else. But that's really not the case. I mean, economies can expand, and we've seen huge economic expansions in the United States. I remember during the Reagan years, and that obliterated some of the worst inflation eventually that we'd ever seen. We can do that. We can expand, but we can't do it under government regulation. We can't do it with, every government agency, particularly in the state of Oregon, having a microscope up your butt, every time you want to make a buck, So, our population, increases. I mean, in theory, there's just a lot of things we can do to expand the economy. We could start utilizing our natural resources and sell to the rest of the world, and we would just explode with economic activity. And the tax revenues in the U.S. Treasury would pile up, and if we had responsible people that were at the helm, the debt could be paid. The inflation of the money supply could be stopped, and we'd all frolic in pastures with rainbows, unicorns, and all that.
Well, I guess we have no reason to expect the Brandon regime to lead the way on any of these things that we said would be good for America, because that crime family is so deep in the bribery schemes that are becoming more and more apparent that they are enmeshed in, including the mentally addled president, that that might be one of the things that has to be done, unfortunately, before we can fix some of these problems more permanently, is expose the criminal that is tied to the president of the United States. And unfortunately, the very entities that we thought were supposed to be conducting investigations seem to be the Federal Bureau of Cover-up and deception, because the FBI director is officially refusing to release the memo that they know exists, that alleges back in 2016, I believe, 2016 or 2020, a long enough time ago to have impacted the 2020 election for sure. That alleged a bribery scheme involving President Joe Biden, and the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, James Comer, says he plans to meet with Wray on Wednesday, but declared that the Bureau's notification of refusing to comply with a lawful subpoena will not be tolerated. He's going to hold the guy in contempt. I think they should impeach him. because any steps he takes to fail to comply with a lawful subpoena by the Congress of the United States should result in him being put on trial. And I want to see Democrats actually vote to keep a guy in there who's covering up something. That will be a fabulous campaign issue.
Well, they will.
This memo is going to be, people are going to find out what's on it and when it came out, and it is shocking how corrupt this isn't. I don't even know if this memo now is about Biden himself and his family. I think this is really about the law enforcement agencies in the deep state that are covering for him while they target people like President Trump.
The Federal Bureau of Nothing to See here.
Yeah. The Federal Bureau of Political Intimidation. I mean, this is what they do now, which means that I'm getting closer to this whole idea that they should just be defunded. We should start over. If there's a legitimate
or defund them, not start over.
Well, if there's a legitimate counterintelligence thing that needs to be done to prevent foreign intelligence agencies from, coming after us, which they don't do very well at this point, or terrorists, great. Start an agency for that, limit it to that, limit its powers to that, and that's it. But this, I can investigate anything I feel like, including where I cannot establish a legal predicate under the law, but I'm going to do it anyway, and I'm going to create phony stories for people to go out and place in the media, and then I'm going to cite that as the justification for getting a Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act warrant to read your correspondence, and it's the correspondence of somebody running for or actually is president of the United States. It's like, I don't want that agency anymore. I don't want it.
No. Yeah, it's not serving its purpose, and I don't believe it has served its purpose, Kevin, for decades. I don't think this is new for the FBI. My son and I have talked about this at length, and we've really tried to figure out how states ratified the 17th Amendment, because that just doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? And it really hurt our representative republic. And his posit is and I've read a few things like this. The Hoover, is it Hoover, or what was his?
Herbert Hoover, or J. Edgar Hoover.
J. Edgar Hoover, yeah. Through the Hoover years, that they've been doing this for a long time. That they've been gathering intelligence on U.S. citizens, gathering intelligence on politicians, and they exert that influence to get the outcomes that they want. And
they use it to attack and destroy people and affect the political process, which is the furthest thing from what they were supposed to be doing, which means get rid of them. And then maybe states can take up the mantle on this and figure out what they're going to do if they need, because they have law enforcement powers. They can investigate things. Why don't they do that?
Yeah. Well, it worked well for 100 and some odd years. I mean, we didn't have a big, well-funded, federal police force for, the first part of America's history. Yeah. I think the House can defund them, right? I mean, the House has the purse strings. All they do is vote, no money for the FBI. Done. Closed. Keep the doors locked. No money for the electric bill. Nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think.
Will it happen? No, it won't happen, because the FBI goes, okay, well, if you want to do that, then here's some videos that are going to leak out.
Yeah, and and by the way, we're opening an investigation. We're going to into you. We don't even know about what, but we're going to leak all kinds of things that aren't true for the investigation that are supposedly not supposed to be leaked, so that we can destroy anybody who disagrees with us. That's an entity that's got to be removed from power. It's just that simple.
Look, Pat is my spirit animal.
Defund the fourth branch of government, which that's also the IRS, which is another law enforcement entity gone rogue. So here's a startling piece of information, and I'm going to read it verbatim, because this is a news report. This isn't me saying this is how I feel. about masks. There is a German researchers have researched this, as well as, it turns out, OHSU is involved in some of this research, and randomized controlled findings. 21 observational studies were reviewed, and the reductions were statistically non-significant. In other words, the reductions that were provided by the masks in terms of COVID transmission, they say, were statistically non-significant, particularly in a Danish and a Canadian controlled study. And so I'm just reading from this article, and so they're trying to review it, but they actually are so far concluding that there's a longer ongoing review of mask effectiveness against viral transmission, both COVID and influenza. And this longer review says, quote, probably make little or no difference, unquote. So I'm not spreading medical misinformation. I'm spreading medical information in the way we receive it from researchers. And people can debate for themselves if they think this is meaningful. Meanwhile, apparently the level of carbon dioxide that is trapped as a result of wearing masks, 8 times the amount of carbon dioxide is toxic. Eight times the normal level. Mask wearers are breathing 35 to 80 times the normal level, according to this report. So there's a concern that maybe these masks are actually inflicting harm, causing high blood pressure, reducing thinking ability, increasing respiratory problems, and reproductive concerns, among others. There is a U.S. Navy toxicity expert set the exposure level for submarines carrying female crew, because they have to bring their own oxygen when they go into the water, and they have to maintain certain levels of oxygen relative to CO2.
Yeah,
and it says if it's carrying a female crew, which the presumption is that some females could actually be pregnant in that circumstance, maybe not even know they're pregnant yet, but they could be.
Sure.
It's supposed to be set to 0.8% of the air is CO2, at which point there's an increased risk of stillbirths. And chronic exposure to 0.3% can produce irreversible neuron damage in offspring and reduce spatial learning, reduce circulating levels of insulin like growth factor 1. I mean, I'm just reading from this. So there's all kinds of negative consequences of a high level of CO2. And the people that issued mandates, will they be held accountable for any of this?
I don't think so. I was an anti-mask Nazi. I'll probably die of either skin cancer or colon cancer because I walked out of a dermatologist's office that made me wear a mask, and I would not go get the whatever the camera thing is, colonoscopy. You know what I'm talking about, because the hospital, not only would they force me to wear a mask, but they required that I get a COVID test.
Yeah.
And I came unglued on him. I said, I've had COVID. I'll tell you if I have COVID because I know what it's like. Oh, no, you must have a test now.
Well, apparently there's still places in the country that are requiring masks. New York City's municipal health system still requires masks for everyone 2 years and older, regardless of vaccination status. Although activists are pressuring the local hospital to reinstate its mandate by projecting slogans on the building. So there's actually people campaigning for these mandates to be put into place. Campaigning
with, no doubt, grants from taxpayer-funded sources.
There you go. Your tax dollars at work. DC Court of Appeals, which administers the bar exam for the District of Columbia, is apparently going into damage control mode after the Washington Free Beacon published its May 18th memo that test takers of the bar exam, that they are requiring people to during the 12 hours of the exam to wear masks this summer. Even though the building that it's being administered in removed their own mask rule in April. So they're just, people
ridiculous.
It's like a mental illness, and it just continues.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I don't know what the answer is to that, except just don't comply.
Yeah, at this point, that really is the answer, isn't it?
It is.
I just read the news. I didn't, and I reacted to it. So if people are like, well, that's misinformation, go complain to all of the quoted news sources that I read from.
Well, that won't stop some of our platforms from, popping a red flag. They don't care if you're quoting a news source. Oh my God, somebody's doing wrong speak. There's some wrong speak on the platform. Shut that down.
We should maybe just change the name of the show from Captive Audience to Wrong Speak.
It's not a bad idea, Kevin. I kind of like it.
All right. Maybe we'll put that up for a vote with the followers. So I like to have a couple of good pieces of news here. I think we have some. One is that apparently they've selected the Oregon Air National Guard's 173rd Fighter Wing to be the next place to receive the F-35A Lightning training squadron. We have the F-15s here. I didn't realize that there's 1,400 personnel associated with the Air National Guard in Oregon. I got to hear the commander of the Air Wing speak on Memorial Day. Pretty smart guy. For one day, Democrats pretend to be patriotic and think that our soldiers really die for our freedom, and then they go back to being, communists and screwing everybody over. But Cliff Bentz announced this, and this is actually really good. At least they're continuing to place value on having a national defense and protecting the homeland, because that wing became very important after 9/11 when we realized that the closest help might actually be hundreds of miles away and not even armed, which is crazy. When people started using planes as missiles, but
yeah. Well, Democrats have taken us into most of the largest wars in our history.
Yeah, and escalated them.
Yeah, it's a great way to launder money.
Exactly. So another good piece of news. You might remember back during 2022, there was this ad that was put out by the now Congresswoman from the 6th Congressional District, Andrea Salinas. She launched a negative ad against candidate and businessman Mike Erickson, the Republican.
I remember that.
It said he was charged with felony drug possession. However, this is actually not borne out by what's known as the facts or the
those pesky things.
And they were warned by Erickson's campaign and sent a cease and desist letter, but Salinas kept running the ad anyway and went on to win by less than 2.5%, a very narrow margin.
Very narrow.
However, it turns out that there is a law on the books in Oregon called the Oregon Corrupt Practices Act. Outright lies, where it's a lie, you use it in a campaign, and you continue to use it in a campaign, is a violation of a law on the books. Now, I don't know if the First Amendment will nix this on some sort of appeal at some point, but apparently the Clackamas County Court has made available the 127-page transcript of the May 25th judge's review and decision on whether to strike the defamation lawsuit filed or continue it. And the decision's the court concluded that the Erickson campaign has made sufficient showing that the statements made by the Salinas campaign were not true. And of course they were warned. And so I don't know, this is going to be really interesting because although we're used to people lying in politics, this is like getting caught red-handed and winning an election narrowly. And I think Andrea Salinas should remember that if she in fact does violate Oregon law and gets found culpable for that, she's in the House of Representatives that could remove her.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the Oregon Supreme Court will cover for her.
They probably will. And so this is why we're going to watch this drama unfold. I know the lawyer that's involved with this, and it was only a few thousand votes out of 300,000 cast, which always seems to skew in one direction, as we know, when cheating and lying is involved. But I think it's good news that maybe Salinas will get her comeuppance. Certainly, maybe to the point where she can't run again, which would be great. So,
that would be nice. Yeah, it would be nice. We should have won that one.
So there's been some breaking news that has come out in the stories that have been covered by the captive audience last week with regard to the upcoming effort to recall the national committeeman here in Oregon, Solomon Yu. David, what's the stories? What's the latest on that?
Well, David Bossie, the president of Citizens United and advisor to the Trump campaign, both in 2016, 2020, and I believe still to this very day, has come out in support of our national committee man, Solomon Yu. It's hit the national news. Was it John Solomon with Just the News, I think, that wrote
Just the News, yeah.
Yeah. Just the News came out with a piece, and so did another national news outlet, PJ Media. So, there's a lot of, there seems to be, I guess this is happening in more than one state, apparently. Apparently, we're seeing kind of a purge effort throughout some of the state parties and stuff that, people who are friendly to Trump, maybe they're being nudged out, let's put it that way. Although you can hardly call this particular recall, which is long on old spurious accusations and very, very short on any firsthand evidence, a nudge.
Well, this is there's quite some detail in these articles. They are national publications. We use Just the News for much of the things that we cover because they actually are just the news and not, political spin from the Communist Broadcasting Service or MSLSD or the always biased coverage news or any of these or the Communist News Network. We don't have to go through those filters to get actual news. So I think it's we're taking this seriously, and then of course there's a PJ Media article that also came out today by somebody that we know that I believe we're going to have on the show tomorrow night.
Yeah, somebody who was there somebody who was a firsthand witness of these supposed trespasses. Jeff Reynolds. So if you use Twitter, you can go to my Twitter account and you can kind of go look at that, and I've got a lot of the stuff that's going on with this. I think I don't have a vote in this particular vote. I guess you could say I don't have a dog in the fight since I'm no longer a part of the state central committee. Just a lowly PCP, but Solomon's a good guy, and I think he's getting railroaded. So I'm glad to help.
So that is twitter.com/DLOREN Darnell. Is that correct?
Yeah, at D Lauren Darnell.
So I just posted the link to that Twitter for folks that want to go and get even more detail and information. I guess this story will continue to unfold during the week, but Jeff, the author of the article, and somebody who, as you said, was there and witnessed these things firsthand, is going to be.
He's an honest guy who is in the same boat. He doesn't have a dog in the fight. He moved to Florida. He has no reason to say anything or spin anything other than just what the truth is.
Yep.
And I just think it's important for those people that were new. A lot of them are new in the state central committee. I think it's important for those people to, do their best to try to find the truth in this matter. I mean, you can't just take this Steele dossier, 37 pages of, stuff, and take it, for gospel without kind of looking at the other side and maybe asking some people who are there. And that's kind of what we're doing, is providing, the other perspective of people who were actually there.
Yeah, and I mean, parties have their form of due process, just like our justice system does, but they all fundamentally must thrive on the truth, and without that, then I guess we're no better than the Democrats, who have been doing this not only via their water carriers in the media, but using the justice system we just talked about, that's covering up for Joe Biden, to defraud the public and to alter the outcome of elections, and to try and damage people that are running for president, such as President Trump. It has real consequences. And so hopefully everyone gets the maximum amount of information from people who actually have firsthand knowledge. That is really important. So anyway, I've posted those links. People can go read those stories. And then tomorrow night, Jeff Reynolds will join the captive audience, and he'll do a deep dive with Sonny and Don to talk about the story that he wrote, that I've also posted here.
Yeah.
Cock-a-doodle-doo is right. So anyway, we covered a lot
Darnell Farm.
That was a long weekend of news that we just, threw at everybody. But hopefully everyone had a good and somber, in some ways, I think, Memorial Day weekend, where we remembered all those people that gave everything so that we could sit here and spout off and argue about stuff and try to come up with the better answers, the truth and the solutions. So anyway, and I think I won't be probably on until next week, because I'll be at this meeting and the event's taking place at the end of this week. But Sonny and Don will be on tomorrow night, and then I guess you might be on Friday, Solomon. Is that pretty likely?
I don't know, because I'm going to that meeting too.
Okay, it's the first Friday as well. So, but we'll figure out something. We'll let everyone know. So stay tuned. But please share this show with everyone you can, because folks need to hear all this stuff, and we want to help them make sure that they can persuade others of what's happening to their state and their nation, and do the right.
Absolutely.
Have a great night, everyone. Thanks, David, and I'll see you in Madras at the end of the week.